The sky of Revox 9 burned like a ripped-open volcano. Flaming debris rained across the battlefield as alien warships exploded one after another, their death rattles echoing in the thin atmosphere. The ground shook with every blast, turning the planet's desolate desert into a churning sea of dust and fire. At the very center of this chaos sprinted a lone human figure, Sergeant Valen Cross, a Deathworlder, a shock trooper, and quite possibly the most dangerous soldier Earth had ever produced. His mark for battle armor was a mess of cracks and scourge marks. His visor was shattered, a spider web of fractures obscuring the hellscape around him. His oxygen tanks were leaking precious air into the toxic environment. But he was still moving, and he was moving fast. Thundering behind him was a full battalion of Zyrak Hunters. Towering insectoid soldiers with chitinous armor and plasma rifles. Twice the size of Valen's own torso. Their sharp, membranous wings sliced through the air with an unnerving buzz, and their war screeches echoed through the burning wasteland, a sound designed to instill terror. Target: the human. Their commander's voice roared over their coms, a guttural shriek that promised death. A storm of superheated plasma bolts chased Valen like a swarm of angry, falling stars. He saw the ground ahead of him vaporize, heard the sizzle of superheated sand. Without breaking stride, he dove behind the twisted, broken wing of a fallen starship, rolled through the dust, and launched himself upward. With a powerful jet-assisted leap, the world spun for a moment, a blur of fire and sky. Midair, suspended against the backdrop of exploding ships, he twisted his body and fired 3 perfectly aimed shock rounds from his rifles straight into the charging hunters. Bay, O, M, boom boom. The impacts were devastating. 3 of the insectoid warriors exploded in spectacular showers of purple ichor and shattered carapace. Valen landed hard, his boots sliding across a stretch of hot metal debris. His helmet's heads-up display flickered and died. He was blind to his vitals, his ammo count, everything. All he had left were his senses. His heart pounded against his ribs like an overworked engine. But as he looked back at the carnage she'd housed, a smirk touched his lips. "Come on then," he muttered to the wind, his voice a low growl. "Try harder." The Zyrak swarm responded with a unified, enraged shriek and charged with renewed fury. They weren't just soldiers. They were predators, and their prey had just drawn blood. Valen, now disarmed of his spent rifle, didn't retreat. Instead, he reached down and grabbed the severed arm of a dead hunter. It was a giant, scythe-like blade, razor-sharp and surprisingly light. HFY, testing its balance, and then used it like a spinning shield as he ran forward, directly into the oncoming horde. Plasma bolts sparked and deflected off the organic metal as he barreled into their ranks. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence. He slammed into the first alien, the scythe blade cutting it clean in half. He crushed the second with a brutal shoulder slam, the sound of cracking exoskeleton lost in the din of battle. The third leaped onto him from the side, its deadly claws outstretched, aiming for his throat. Valen reacted with pure instinct. He dropped the scythe, grabbed the creature's throat midair, and met its savage gaze. "Wrong, human," he snarled. With a sickening twist, he snapped its neck and threw the limp corpse aside without a second thought. He picked up his makeshift weapon and kept moving, a force of nature, cutting a path through the enemy. But then, the ground began to shake violently, far more intensely than before. A massive shadow fell over him, blotting out the fiery sky. The Zyrak war machine had arrived, a Titan Behemoth. It was a 40-foot armored monster walking on 4 massive legs, a walking fortress of steel and hate, bristling with cannons that could turn mountains into sand. Its single, glowing, red optic eye locked onto Valen. A synthesized, booming voice echoed across the battlefield, devoid of any emotion. Designation: human. Priority: elimination. The main cannon on its chassis began to glow, charging with terrifying energy. Valen looked up at the colossal machine, at the star forming in its weapon barrel, and whispered, "Oh, shut up." The blast fired. It wasn't a bolt. It was a wave of pure energy, a miniature sun that scorched the very air it passed through. Valen dove under it, feeling the intense heat on his back, the ground behind him turning to molten glass. He didn't stay down. He got up and sprinted toward the Titan directly into its line of fire. Alarms blared within the Titan's colossal cockpit. Its targeting systems struggled, confused by this seemingly suicidal tactic. No sane creature ran towards a weapon of this magnitude, but Valen wasn't just sane. He was human. And humans improvise. As another, smaller volley of cannon fire tore up the ground around him, he triggered his last jump booster. The powerful thrust launched him high into the air, right onto the Titan's armored side. He climbed fast, stabbing the Sotharm blade into the machinery, using it as a handhold to pull himself up. Sparks erupted. Metal shrieked in protest. The Titan swung one of its massive manipulator arms, trying to swat him off like a persistent fly. Valen held on for dear life, his muscles screaming. He finally reached the head panel, just below the giant red eye. With a grunt of exertion, he ripped open an access port, exposing a cluster of glowing conduits and wiring. He didn't hesitate. He pulled out a full clip of thermal grenades from his belt, armed them all, and dropped them inside the machine's skull. Through clenched teeth, he whispered one last thing to the mechanical giant. "Say goodbye." He pushed off just as the grenades detonated. Kothum, the Titan Behemoth, exploded in a magnificent, towering pillar of fire and shrapnel. The shock wave threw Valen across the battlefield like a ragdoll. He hit the ground hard, tumbling end over end, every bone in his body protesting. But he was alive. Barely. Smoke and fire billowed from the burning wreck of the war machine. The remaining Zyrak soldiers, those who had survived Valen's initial rampage, simply started their charge halted. Their aggression vanished, replaced by a stunned, primal terror. Their commander, his voice now trembling, shrieked a new order. "Fall back. Fall back. The human is unstoppable." Slowly, painfully, Valen pushed himself up. Pain shot through his cracked ribs like lightning. He coughed, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the dusty ground. He wiped his chin with the back of his gauntlet and raised one fist toward the retreating alien army. "Next time," he gasped, his voice hoarse. "Send a real challenge." Then, his strength finally gave out. He collapsed to one knee, the world spinning around him. Just as his vision started to fade, a new sound cut through the smoke-filled air, the roar of friendly engines. Earth fleet dropships descended through the smoke overhead like avenging angels. Their ramps slammed down before they even touched the ground, and his squad rushed out, their triumphant cheers echoing across the now quiet battlefield. "Valen, you crazy Deathworlder, you took down a Titan alone," one of them yelled, slapping him on the back. Valen managed a weak, tired smirk. "I got bored waiting for backup. They half-carried, half-dragged him onto the dropship, the engines roaring to life.